Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. We are doctors Sarah and Alicia, maternity physicians and moms who have been through it all. We want to empower you with knowledge so you can have the best pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience you can.
She Found Health and She Found Motherhood is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This information does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you've received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or another qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The views expressed by She Found Health and She Found Motherhood and our guests are not representative of any of the institutions with which we are affiliated. Some of our podcast episodes are sponsored so that we can keep getting great info out there to you, our listeners. We only partner with companies that we truly believe in. Some of our links and suggestions may be affiliates, and we would appreciate you using them to help fund this important work. Now let's get to it.
Welcome, everybody. I am so excited. One of our good friends and colleagues, Janette, is here to talk to us today around prepping for a cesarean section. So if you know you're going to have a C-section, what can we do in advance to prepare ourselves for that? Janette is an athletic therapist by trade. She is also a high-level rugby player. In fact, her rugby team was inducted into the Ontario Rugby Hall of Fame, which is pretty incredible. So she comes from a background of helping people to rehab from injuries. And I love the way that she always presents pregnant people as athletes, right? And it is so true. We go to the max of our physiologic capability by the end of pregnancy. That is why you guys are so exhausted if you're in your third trimester, right? We're pushing our bodies to the max. And Janette really likes to bring in that framing because with most injuries, we can recover, but it takes time and energy and work. And the same thing is for delivery, whether that's cesarean section or a vaginal delivery. Our bodies have gone through a lot and we need to care for them and we need to rehab them just like any other quote unquote injury that we might have. So it's a musculoskeletal injury like any other. So let's approach it like that with the little caveat of you have a new human to also take care of in the midst of it, which does sometimes add a wee bit of complexity. So today we're going to chat with Janette about what we can do if we're having a cesarean section to prepare for that. Now, we did a podcast and we'll link it in the show notes, the top 5 reasons that people have had that we have cesarean sections. Obviously, the most common reason is it's an emergency, so unplanned. But to be honest, the stuff we're talking about today is applicable regardless of your mode of delivery. So highly recommend, even if you don't think you're going to be having a C-section, listen to this podcast. Check out Janette's resources because they truly are incredible and they are transferable regardless of what mode of delivery you are in the most case. So Janette, is there anything that I missed out on? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
No, other than the fact that it's been a hot minute. I think it's been like a good year and a half since we connected in real life.
Right.
So
in my real life, we meet on Zoom. We've never actually met in person.
Across the country. Well, the beauty about technology is that healthcare practitioners can collaborate so far away from each other. And so thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
It's always a pleasure. And you've got 2 little-ish, they're not that little, but little-ish ones as well, right? 6 and 9-year-old?
Oh, yeah, it's not so little anymore, though. It's always a different level of challenge. Now I don't have to worry about dressing them, but they do have to come back and ask me about all kinds of other things that was parenting in real time.
Totally. It's a shifting landscape, parenting is.
It is. It
Okay,
is.
So we're going to be talking about 3 major themes today. So why don't we get into kind of the meat of the podcast? Where do you want to start with?
Well, firstly, I would love to say that I'm still a rugby player, but I'm not. Rugby is one of those sports that I always thought was the toughest sport to play. And this is why I keep talking about the fact that I played rugby for 15 years, because when you compare pregnancy to the toughest sport that you can possibly imagine, in my case, it's rugby, I have to say, pregnancy was way harder. And it's way harder because there's just so long. Like there's no rugby game that lasts for 9 months with no halftime and no subs. And then that guarantee ends in a season-ending injury. With that kind of context in place, that's how I want to approach the concept of cesarean recovery, because it is a season-ending sports injury. And I want to highlight season ending and not career ending. It doesn't have to be career ending. And with my background in sports orthopedics, It makes sense to me when I talk to folks who have been active their whole lives and they get into pregnancy and they're like, oh, I'm going to keep doing all these sports and working out. And there's a level of frustration of, well, I want to, but my body won't let me. And then afterwards, an injury that happens, whether it's vaginal, to your point, or cesarean, textbook vaginal or cesarean, you're still often left with a, what the heck just happened to my body? And what do I do? Because I would do something about this if I knew what. So I just wanted to set the scene of this is the context in which I want to talk about cesarean recovery. Because cesarean recovery isn't just physical recovery. You got your body, you got your mind, and then you got your rehab team, your healthcare team, or your support people. But none of that is as impactful if you don't start before the injury happens. I will just call it childbirth, right? If you have the opportunity to prepare for a surgery, to prepare for an injury, you're going into the biggest rugby game of your life, you want to do some prep work. So that's the groundwork I just wanted to lay here before we went into the meat and potatoes of this podcast.
I love that. And I love that framing because I think it is the season-ending injury, but then you get to start a new season, which is lovely and wonderful and also takes prep. And we talk a lot about how to prepare in our pregnancy to parenthood masterclass. So if you are pregnant and you need a little bit of more around the kind of childbirth education piece and the postpartum and newborn piece, over half of our course is based on caring for yourself and your newborn postpartum. And Janette is actually one of our featured guests in that. She gives a great little talk about that early rehab piece in that course as well. Make sure to check it out. But why don't we start first about, you mentioned your mind. So when you're talking about your mind, how do we prepare our mind for this potential or certain expectation?
Well, preparing your mind isn't just some wishy-washy, oh, that's nice to think about it and all this kind of stuff. It's huge. It is absolutely massive. Our mental health is just as important as our physical health. And Alicia, I love how you mentioned your birth prep programs talks about how to prep the person who's pregnant, not how to prep for how to care for the baby, although that is very important as well. I know that very often we take preparation courses. I know I took a lot of prep courses into my 2 pregnancies, and it talks about how to prepare for how to change the baby's diaper, what to do if they can't sleep, what to do. And it's all baby focused. Again, super important. But what about the pregnant person? Like, what about the vessel that happens to be carrying the baby? If that person's knowledge about cesareans, so in this case, we're talking about cesareans, if one understands simply what the surgery entails, and if one can have realistic expectations of what it might be like after a major abdominal surgery, because that's what it is. A cesarean is a major abdominal surgery. It's not just like a external scar. Having those 2 things decreases overwhelm. And that's what I mean by preparing your mind. If we can decrease that overwhelm with knowledge and realistic expectations, truly, I believe women will have a much better recovery outcome. Because if you go in there overwhelmed, you come out, I gotta say, a lot more overwhelmed. Like you said, you've got a human to take care of. There's a little bit of sleep deprivation happening.
Yeah. And we also know in that birth trauma world that a lot of the birth trauma, now I'm not talking physical, I'm talking about psychological here, isn't because of the way you gave birth. It isn't because of the complexity of the situation. It's because the expectations that you had and the reality that occurred are hugely mismatched. And so people who don't have any kind of expectations about what the realities, which frankly can be significant, of childbirth are, not necessarily. Some people have wonderful, beautiful deliveries. That's exactly what they want. But some people don't. And if we haven't even considered that while we're preparing for our deliveries, then that's when that higher potential of kind of birth trauma, that psychological issue comes up, because the reality and the expectation were so mismatched going into it. Now, obviously, if the expectation, my birth plan with my first was I was going to go in and then I was going to have a failed forceps, and I'm just going to end up with a C-section, have a massive postpartum bleed, my baby was going to be in the NICU. So my expectations were pretty low. I had a lovely vaginal delivery. He needed a little bit of resuscitation.
but everything went well. So that mismatch is great. You're going to come out flying colors. But at the opposite mismatch is where the challenges really happen. So you're 100% correct. If we have a good expectation of what that's going to look like, what the recovery is going to look like, it's going to set us up for such more success in the long term and coming out of that birth experience.
I have to say that a lot of the cesarean birth moms I speak to in my ecosystem, I ask them often, what was your prenatal program like? Specifically, what did you learn about C-sections? And unfortunately, what are my stats here? I always pretend I'm a researcher on my Instagram account. So I remember running a story. It might have been 95%, something really high, of women saying straight up there was nothing mentioned about the word C-section. And there were a handful of, they talked about cesareans, but I didn't think that would happen to me. So I tuned out. And I invite folks to really tune in. It might not happen to you, but the reality is 1 in 3 chances it will. Here in Canada, those are the stats. It varies from city center to city center, but there's a 1 in 3 chance that you're going to have a surgical birth. So just understand the bare minimum. What's the surgery about? And then have more realistic expectations of what it might look like on the flip side. And then be ready to ask more questions.
Totally agree. So we've covered our mind, right? So knowledge about the potential of it. And again, if it doesn't happen and you don't want it to happen and it doesn't happen, great. But sometimes for our baby's wellness, it does happen. And certainly we review that in that podcast I mentioned earlier. And then having realistic expectations so that you can go in prepared, right? So you don't come out disappointed if that's not what you were hoping for and what you ended up with, because that's a real challenge for people. So next we're talking about body, right? So how can we prepare ourselves physically if we know we're going in for a C-section or we know that there's a potential we're going in for a C-section?
Yes. And as someone with an orthopedic background, this is absolutely my wheelhouse. And I always like to highlight this funny piece of research we learned about back in school. And school was a long time ago. But even then, I laugh because what I'm about to tell you sounds so obvious. And basically the research piece said the stronger an athlete goes into surgery, the better her outcome, the better her recovery, more specifically, period. And it didn't say you have to do this specific workout program and you have to be able to squat your body weight, or like you have to be able to sprint a certain speed. It wasn't even that specific. But the point, it really stuck to me because I thought, oh, that's it? The stronger you are going into surgery, like that's it? And quite frankly, that is it. Like over my 21 years of practice, the stronger athletes just have a better recovery. And what's interesting, Alicia, is that strength can happen in so many different ways. So I know some listeners are like so ready for Janette to give them like, here's the core exercise program. Here it is. And fortunately and unfortunately, I don't have one. But the good news is that you can do almost anything, like any kind of physical activity, modify it for your needs. I know everybody's pregnancy is different, but as long as you have some level of fitness going into your surgery, you're going to be good. You're going to be good. And so this is also speaking to individuals who are thinking about getting pregnant. Be strong. Be strong, my friends, because this is the ultra of ultra marathons. You got to train for this sport. If you have the opportunity to, and I just mean go for a walk every day, that's good. That's a really great form of exercise and is accessible to most. Be strong going into your ultra marathon, pregnancy, and strong going into your surgery. And that's the first thing I want to say, prepare your body. So that's number one. And a sub to that is, core rehabilitation, or the understanding of what the core means, and to be able to tap into your transverse abdominis, your pelvic floor. Can you breathe using your diaphragm, or are you one of those taking small, shallow breaths, or a breath holder? These are things that if you are mindful about during your pregnancy, and this is a huge part of a lot of prenatal exercise programs, actually, then you're off to the races also. That's really great core preparation. And in my world, I refer to them as the ABCs. A stands for alignment, like what is your posture in any given moment, including standing. B is for breathing, as Alicia said. So B is for breathing. So there's two types of breaths that I teach, but one very important one is the belly breath. And then C is core control. So like when you're doing things, are you able to zip up, access that deep core as you're lifting and bending and twisting and walking and doing? And are you able to let it all go, which is equally important? So that's core exercises in my world, the ABCs.
Oh, I love that. And I think that evidence actually bears out in pregnancy. We know people who are more active in pregnancy have an easier pregnancy, have an easier birth, and have an easier recovery postpartum. We know that. And again, it doesn't have to be complex. It's what you can do at that stage. So some people are lifting weights, they're doing deadlifts up until delivery. Other people are walking, other people are swimming. It's whatever works for you and that you can make sure that you're doing and that you enjoy to do. Because if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to do it.
No,
And then that core piece, I think, is great. And I really value when people touch base with their athletic therapist or their physiotherapist prenatally because they learn those skills in their pregnancy. And then it's so much easier to translate them to the recovery postpartum. So if you can access that kind of that prenatally, that exercise, that learning how to connect to your core with your breathing, it is so beneficial, both in birth, frankly, right?
yes,
and
yes.
and in that recovery. So highly recommend people accessing that. And I think you actually have a new program that incorporates some of that. And it's meant to happen in the pregnancy to prepare you for that birth experience and that postpartum rehab. Do you want to take a second and just tell people about that? Because I think it is such an important thing that we don't talk about enough.
I'd love to, and thank you. So with the ABCs, yes, that's preparation. Yeah, you're tuning into your body while you're pregnant. Yes, if you have the opportunity to practice, you're creating really great neural pathways while you don't have a distraction like a newborn, not being able to sleep. So preparing your body in that sense makes sense. But here's why. It's because, and most folks don't know what I'm about to say, is that the best recovery starts the day of your surgery. Like when you come out of surgery, and when you come out of surgery, that's unfortunately not the best time to start learning about how to recover. You want to know about, what are my first core exercises I can do and do it safely? What am I doing for general body exercise? How am I controlling this pain? What about this swelling? Oh my gosh. I'm being told not to get my wound infected. Guess what? I'm on board. But how? These are things that if we can learn ahead of the surgery, that again decreases that overwhelm. In my prenatal program, it's not really called a prenatal program. Maybe I should, Alicia, but it's literally what are you doing for the first 6 weeks post surgery? And you have to learn that before surgery, optimally. It's not an option for a lot of folks. We know 50% of surgeries, of cesareans, are unexpected. They're emergencies, right? But if you have the opportunity, folks, to compare this to any other orthopedic surgery, a hip replacement, an ACL surgery, you have something called pre-op. You go in learning everything you need to know about that surgery, who your therapist is, how much time you got to take off work. You book in all your therapy sessions. You know how much that therapy is going to cost. You know exactly what you're going to be doing. You're given that booklet of your rehab program before your surgery. The Cesarean Recovery Stage 1 program is that booklet.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, we call it prehabilitation, right?
Pre-op,
And that's that,
yes.
that's that kind of, if somebody goes in for a knee replacement, they're doing a lot of work strengthening the muscles around their knees before their surgery. So same thing. So it's that prehabilitation piece that is so important that we often don't talk about. And part of the issue is for a lot of people, well, one, you and I both live in urban centers. So we have access to people to help us. We have access to pelvic physios. We have access to athletic therapists. But a lot of people actually don't live in urban centers that necessarily have a robust postpartum caregivers. And so there's a lot of work that can be done on Zoom now. So that's certainly one option. But another thing is financially, seeing somebody for multiple visits gets very expensive. And so these types of courses that you've developed enable people to, for a much more reasonable cost than seeing a pelvic physio or an athletic therapist for 10 or 12 visits to do this, really allows them to do it in a way that's much more economical for some people, right? Some people need in person, they need a one-to-one, and that's beautiful. And if you have capacity to do that and you're in a center that has that, amazing. But a lot of people aren't, or they can't afford that repeated visits over and over again. So this is a fabulous option, I think, for people out there. And then the third thing is we're going to talk about three things. So we did mind, preparing your mind. Two, we just did a lot on preparing your body. And then number three is preparing your team. And I love this concept. So talk to me a little bit more about that.
Well, the team, I mean, if you think of yourself as an Olympic athlete, no one gets on that podium by themselves. No one. And it's a lot of the support people who make it happen. You can't podium, you can't medal without your support team. So the support team includes, well, your spouse or your partner, your healthcare team, right? Your coaches, your therapists, your physicians. Maybe that includes your doula. Maybe there's a midwife in there, a lactation consultant, right? And also your community, all the people who lift you up. I'm not just talking about anybody. I'm not just talking about, the people that surround you, because there's people who surround you that might pull you down or just don't help the situation along, or who've never gone through a cesarean and therefore could possibly empathize with you and give you that mental support and the shoulder to lean on after the fact. Sometimes we do have to find a new community afterwards. And Alicia, like you were saying, online, there's a blessing that we have such robust online communities now. And certainly part of my programs is the fact that there is a private online community of other cesarean moms who are going through recovery at the same stage. They get it. Oh, they get it. And unless you're going through it as well, I think it's tough for friends and family members who've never gone through it. Healthcare teams, the same thing. Ultimately, the gold standard is seeing someone in person with experienced hands that can help you. But the reality is, sometimes that's not the case. And I want folks to hear this. You are actually a huge part of your own healthcare team. I want to empower listeners to know this. Did you know, with your own non-therapist trained hands, I can't even explain the incredible results that I have seen working with women entirely virtually. Alicia, it's crazy. I wish I could show you before and after pictures and like the stories, because I still to this day can't believe it. Like for 4 years, I've worked almost exclusively virtually. 4 years. And I've had, it's astounding. I'm working with folks who are like on their second cesareans. I work with folks who are returning back to all kinds of activities, pain-free. Their bodies have transformed with their own hands. They've done their own scar massages. They've never seen a therapist. It's astounding what you can do with your own hands if you just learned how. You follow a program and you do it. Now, the thing is, you need 5 minutes every day. So just to round out this whole concept of the team, you can't commit to your rehab if you don't have protected time. It's like being a pro athlete. If you can't get to practice if you're the primary caregiver for your infant, you just can't. Someone else has to take that infant. Obviously, this is the ideal situation. That's not always realistic for everybody. But what if you had that team member who might be your spouse, a partner, your mom, a sister, a friend, who can come and lock in 5 minutes every single day and say, you know what, Alicia, it's your time to rehab. Come only emergencies. You will not see or hear the baby. I got her. You're on your own. Spend the time on your own. Hey, you know what? Let's go crazy. Take 10 minutes. Right? But what I wanted to highlight is that no motivation is good enough to get the results you need without a team. You gotta have people helping you out in your corner. And I want to inspire you that 5 minutes a day of doing your own hands-on massage and simple exercises makes a massive difference.
Yeah, it is. Small changes make huge differences, right? And I think for people who have not had babies, they're thinking 5 minutes, I can do that. No, literally, it's hard to find 5 minutes. So you need to find a team to do your rehab and to do your own self-care, right? to drink a coffee while flipping through a magazine for 10 or 15 minutes. Like these are things that you actually have to find support people to do. And we have a podcast that did this, I think, with Dr. Pip Houghton. If I can find it, I'll also post it on how to get your support team, because you mentioned if you haven't been through it, you don't know how to support. And that's okay. But there's a lot of people on your team who will want to support you, but won't know how to do that. So one of the things that we talked about is actually before you have your baby, again, it's all in the planning, is creating a list of all the things you might need help with: mowing the lawn, making healthy snacks, doing the grocery shopping, folding laundry, snuggling a baby for an hour while I do my core exercises and have a coffee and flip through a magazine. And then actually giving that to your friends or your support team and say, hey, which of these look good to you? Which of these do you think you could help me with? Or get a good friend who's very good at organizing to make a whole Excel spreadsheet. You'll bring them so much joy if they can do this, right? Get a meal train started. Like there's so many ways that you can prepare, but you just have to think about it. And you can delegate that preparation, because it's not fair for you to have to do all of the work. One, you're growing the human. Two, you're birthing the human. Then you have to find somebody to do it for you. Unless you love a good Excel spreadsheet, then go for it on your own. But yeah, so that's a huge piece, is prepare your team and ask them what they like to do, and they're more likely to do it. But ask for help. And we don't do that in our society, right? We are so bad at asking for help. We used to live in multi-generational homes, people who had lots of experience, they were helping out. You go to many other kind of cultures in the world, and they have so much support in those first 4 to 6 weeks postpartum, like incredible amounts of support. And we don't do that here. We live very much independently and don't like to ask for support. But build your community, talk to your community, because you know that if you had somebody else who was going through the same thing, you would want to help them out as well, right?
Absolutely.
So invite people into your world for that support.
One thing I wanted to highlight about this prenatal program is that, hey, this isn't meant for the mom to watch just herself. Similar to all prenatal programs, please have your partner watch it. Have them understand what the exercises might look like. Have them understand what you might feel. Understand what that compression garment might look like, how to get that thing on, and it might need to be cleaned at times. Maybe that could be their job. Have them watch you the whole thing. Have them think critically, oh, here's what she might need. Here's what I can do, right? Or don't also do the delegating is what I'm trying to say. This program is for your whole team to watch, and you have to execute the rehab part, but try to delegate all the other pieces as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And even for the scar massage, like some people are very uncomfortable with that idea of scar massage. And so perhaps your partner or your sister is much less uncomfortable and would be willing to help you out with it. There's so many options here, right? So many options to caring for yourself and asking your team for help. So yeah, that's a great point. We should not be taking all of this on ourselves. This is a team effort. If you're privileged enough to have people around you who want to support you, lean on them, because it's such an important thing. Janette, thank you so much. This was incredible. I really appreciate the insights. I really appreciate all of the hard work you do. How can people find your course? We'll link it in the show notes below, but how can they connect with you? You're on Instagram at Ask Janette.
I'm at Instagram, Ask Janette, same handle on TikTok, same handle on YouTube. And my website does have a lot of free resources. Let's link that C-section hospital bag free resource into the show notes.
Yes.
Yeah, so folks, if you wanted to get prepared, everyone packs or knows they need to pack a hospital bag. I personally didn't do it, but don't be like Janette. So if you're going to be packing a hospital bag, just include the things for cesarean. You don't know if you're going to have one, just throw them in there. So there's that free resource just linked down below in the show notes.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm hoping you have gum in that list. If not, add it. There's good evidence for early chewing of gum after cesarean section. Helps to get your bowels moving, right? So when we have a C-section, we all have our hands in your innards, right? And so our bowels go, what the heck? Right? And then they stop. They say, I don't know what's happening. And they stop. And then they take a while to get going, a day or two. So you can have a lot of gas retention postpartum, and that C-section can be really uncomfortable. And so chewing gum post-cesarean section, I mean, wait till you are awake and sitting up, but chewing gum actually helps to get your bowels moving more quickly, which helps you to pass gas, get your bowel movements going and all that type of stuff. So Janette's mouth is wide open right now. So she's going to go add gum to her
I feel like
checklist.
6 Instagram reels being made right now. Hang on, this is by research? This is evidence?
Oh, yeah.
This is
Oh, yeah, for sure.
no.
I made a
Boy,
reel about it. I'll send it your way.
gosh.
Yeah, no, it's incredible.
Huge.
And make
Yes,
sure it's not
yes.
like Hubba Bubba. My husband just
Oh,
got 7 cavities, and we realized it's because he was chewing gum. Hubba Bubba. What adult?
actually?
Yeah, what adult chews Hubba Bubba? Anyway, so he switched over to a sugar-free gum, do a Trident or a Dentine or whatever. But
Oh my
yeah,
gosh, this is huge.
right?
Like,
Learning, we're all learning.
now I have so many bowel questions for you for later after we're done this podcast.
I don't know if I ever told you, I had somebody, maybe you said it, I don't know who said it, but somebody told me about the sensation of having a C-section, and they equated it to somebody like opens up your drawer and you can feel them rifling around, getting the underwear out of your drawer, getting the socks out of the back of your drawer, right? Because when you have a spinal anesthetic, it takes that pain sensation away, but it doesn't take that touch sensation away. So it's a very kind of strange sensation when it's happening. Again, that preparation, those expectations, if you don't know that's what you're going to expect, then you're like, oh, what's happening? Am I not anesthetized? Am I going to feel this? But it's the pain sensation and the cold sensation that they take it away. So they test your skin with ice to make sure that those nerve receptors are blocked, but they don't take away the touch. So you feel a lot of touch during a cesarean section, which again can creep people out if they're not prepared. So there you go.
Look at all these golden nuggets
all
at the
this learning.
end of this podcast.
Right?
Unplanned, folks. This was
Unplanned. Awesome. Okay, Janette, thank you so much. We will link the couple of podcasts we mentioned. We'll link the course in the show notes below. People will stop this podcast and they will go to follow you on Instagram at Ask Janette, and watch out for all those reels on gum that Janette's going to do after this.
That's right.
So exciting.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and to sign up for our community for weekly bump blasts. Make sure to check us out on Instagram or Facebook at she.found.motherhood, and head on over to your favorite podcast app and leave a review and a 5-star rating. If you enjoyed this podcast, take a pic of yourself listening to it and share it on social. Make sure to tag us on it so we know to keep making them.